period 1972 to 1980 of the Cold War era, the PNP government under Prime Minister Michael Manley changed Jamaica's political, economic, and social development policy and trajectory to democratic socialism, which also informed a change in Jamaica's foreign policy outlook. During that period, Jamaica joined the non-aligned movement and pursued relations with other socialist and communist countries of the Eastern Bloc, including Cuba. Many of the challenges we face today are anchored in that period of our history. We must learn from our past. It is not the first time that the global order has changed in profound ways. We could go back to the Napoleonic era, but we won't go that far. Let's go to the post-World War II era, 1945 to 1950, when the actual multilateral system that exists now was formed. Born out of the ashes of global conflict, it is the most decisive and extensive ordering of global affairs in modern history. The United States of America and the Allied powers constructed a global order anchored on the formation of the IMF, the World Bank, the United Nations, and the General Agreement on Tariffs on Trade, GATT, which we now call the WTO. This multilateral order drastically reduced interstate conflict and enabled unprecedented economic growth over the last 80 years. It is not perfect, but it is better than anything that existed before. Madam Speaker, while multilateral rules-based institutions were being established, two other developments were happening in parallel. Many other developments were happening, but I want to focus on just two. The first is the emergence of what is called a bipolar power structure, which we generally call, at the time when it was emerging, the Cold War. Two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Between 1947 and 1991, the world split into two completing blocs, the US-led Western Bloc and the Soviet-led Eastern Bloc, each with its own military alliances, economic systems, and ideological frameworks. The second process, Madam Speaker, was the process of decolonization. And this was accelerating. Empires could no longer afford their colonies. Resistance against colonialism internally increased, moving dozens of states to independence across the world. Asia in the 1940s through to the 1950s, Africa in the 1950s through to the 1970s, and the Caribbean in the 1960s through to the 1980s. The United Nations started in 1945 with 51 countries. Today, it has 193 countries. Newly independent states joining this new rules-based multilateral system essentially created a third bloc. And you would hear these terms being used, I certainly heard it when I was growing up, referring to this third bloc as the third world. So the new system of global order, when it emerged with two blocks, the Western Bloc, the Eastern Bloc, divided by a Cold War, a process of decolonization which gave states independence, creating a third bloc. Madam Speaker, the multilateral system afforded newly independent nations like Jamaica a voice and a vote. That was very important in the multilateral system. A voice and a vote. But, Madam Speaker, we had no power. We had no military power. And we had no economic power. Madam Speaker, both superpowers sought to control this third bloc, to expand their spheres of influence, secure strategic geographies, access resources and markets, and spread their culture and ideology. Or simply put, to exercise hegemony. This was the context within which Jamaica started its navigation of a complex global system at its independence. At the outset, the Right Excellent Sir Alexander Bustamante, when asked about Jamaica's alignment, declared, "We are with the West." A simple yet profound framing of Jamaica's foreign policy, economic and social program, and political direction. The Jamaica Labour Party has always taken a pragmatic yet principled approach to the multilateral system and the vicissitudes of the poles of powers within it, while staunchly maintaining our independence of thought and agency to act in our best interest. The position served Jamaica well. The period between 1962 and 1972 saw political stability, the fastest pace of growth and development of the Jamaican economy, and the build-out of our institutions. Madam Speaker, the period 1972 to 1980 of the Cold War era, the PNP government under Prime Minister Michael Manley changed Jamaica's political, economic, and social development policy and trajectory to democratic socialism, which also informed a change in Jamaica's foreign policy outlook. During that period, Jamaica joined the non-aligned movement and pursued relations with other socialist and communist countries of the Eastern Bloc, including Cuba. This was a fundamental and consequential shift based on an almost fanciful ideological aspiration. It placed us in the crossfire of a power struggle between superpowers which was not in our interest and had negative consequences domestically. This period coincided with the collapse of the Jamaican economy, our first debt crisis, the hollowing out of the middle class, and the emergence of widespread political and gang violence. Many of the challenges we face today are anchored in that period of our history. I know what I have said here is going to stir up our antsness, because people do feel very strongly about this period, but I don't think it is ventilated enough. Look, no, what I've said here is not opinion. These are the facts. These are the facts. If you ask me for my opinion, I will give you my opinion. Right? And my opinion is that I admire Michael Manley's intellect. I admire his willingness to challenge, but I also question his judgment. Madam Speaker, as it turned out, by 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed as a pole of power, and the multilateral system entered a unipolar phase dominated by the US, Western liberal globalization, and free markets. The global socialist experiment for which the PNP diverted Jamaica had been defeated and proven to be the wrong path to be pursued. Now, here are the facts. Michael Manley, and this is part of why I admire him as well, would come back to power a reformed man in 1989, abandoning the policy of democratic socialism, embracing the IMF, liberalization, privatization, free markets, and pursuing closer ties with the United States. And this is what the part of the history that is not reconciled. Why did we go down that path?
In the first place. Should not have gone down that path. Only to go to the White House.
That is the question that keeps bothering me. Because it must bother every Jamaican, because had we not diverted for 10 years, even if we had changed government, but kept strategic and wise policies, Jamaica would be far better. Far better. As we have seen with countries like Singapore, facing the same challenges, but maintained a strategic and wise foreign policy.
Absolutely. As a capitalist, 18 years as a capitalist. 18 years.
Madam Speaker, today we see the global system changing again, moving from a unipolar world to now a multipolar world, with the rise of China, India, the reassertion of Russia, and the EU. There are now more players who can exercise military, economic, technological, and normative power within the multilateral system than when it was designed 80 years ago. This means there is likely to be greater contestation within the multilateral system and less automatic consensus on issues and solutions. There is also a greater likelihood of fragmentation, which is what we are seeing now, as powers seek to advance their interests unilaterally. It begs for a reform, urgent reform actually, of the global multilateral system. We cannot abandon it, but it must be reformed to take into consideration these new power dynamics that have emerged. In this dynamic foreign policy environment, Jamaica must be strategic. We cannot go down the road of ideological rhetoric. Been there, done that. Foreign policy is about having a clear framework of principles and values within which we pursue our interests, while treating with the interests and powers of others with whom we engage. My administration has always ensured that our foreign policy serves our economic interests. Whatever I do must make sure that Jamaica can recover quickly, that the person in Westmoreland whose house has not yet been restored, that the chances of a quick restoration is not hampered. And we see the benefits of our foreign policy efforts in the swift mobilization of relief and access to over $6 billion of reconstruction funds from the multilateral financial system. I don't want anybody to talk about foreign policy, because there's no other era in which Jamaica's foreign policy has delivered economic benefits for the people of Jamaica. A strong multilateral system is in Jamaica's interest, and we will always do our part to ensure it works. The essence of agency is that you act on your own will. As a responsible member of the global community, Jamaica will always take the necessary action to be compliant with all our obligations under the multilateral system. Nobody has to put sanction on us or force us, because we have agency. The country would have seen this in our actions when our actions caused us to be removed from the FATF and the AML-CTF grey list in 2024. Grey list, the way our structure and system was, it was reviewed, we ended up on the grey list. Every member of the government worked very hard, including members of the opposition, to pass the necessary legislation, make the necessary policy changes. I mean, there were those saying that these, imperialists imposing global financial things on us, make we resist it. And what? Lose access to the international banking system? That's the logic of the argument. Yes, there are things we must resist when it comes to our values. There are things that define us as Jamaicans that we're not going to change on those. Man is a man, woman is a woman. We're not going to change on that. So we do. But we look at the things that are also in our economic interest. All right. So, Madam Speaker, similarly, when concerns were raised with the government of Jamaica by the United States regarding the Cuban medical mission more than a year ago, I want you to pay attention to that. More than a year ago, we reviewed the program against our laws and the various multilateral conventions under which we have obligations. And let me say from the outset that the Cuban medical mission has been beneficial to the people of Jamaica. The Cuban doctors and nurses have assimilated quite well in our hospital system and have developed strong bonds with the people they serve. I can say that Jamaicans love them and want them to stay. However, there were some aspects of the program which were brought to the attention of the Cuban counterparts, our Cuban counterparts, to include how personnel were paid, that run counter to our own laws and several international conventions. We were hopeful that adjustments could be made to the program to make it compliant and that we could have reached some agreement where we could continue to have the direct services of the Cuban health professionals who are here. We continue to be hopeful that some agreement, arrangement, some changes can be made to the program. We continue to be. However, Madam Speaker, I want it to be noted and always acknowledged in the debate that every year since I have been Prime Minister and before, in this House, we have debated motions on the embargo on Cuba. Yes, my administration did that. Carrying on the position of the PNP administration and the JLP administration before and the PNP administration before. So this notion about abandoning friends and look here, man, keep that in the 70s. We are in a different era now. At all my speeches to the UN General Assembly, there are a few lines in there about Cuba and the embargo. When I spoke at CARICOM, I spoke fairly and frankly. As our closest neighbor, we are concerned for the situation in Cuba. Through CARICOM, Jamaica will do its part to offer support for our brothers and sisters in Cuba. We take note of press reports that talks have opened between Cuba and the United States. This is a moment for reform and reset, and we are hopeful for a positive outcome. In all of what is being said and insinuated, there's one question that must be answered. What would the PNP have done?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You couldn't say that.
Well, we won't know. We won't know.